The desert heat shimmered like glass over the highway outside Santa Fe, the kind of sun that made the air feel thick even when the wind blew. Lena Hartley stood beside her sleek black Audi, one heel buried in the gravel, the other tapping against the steaming asphalt. The shredded rear tire looked as if it had been clawed by a mountain lion. Her designer sunglasses shielded her eyes, but not the exhaustion etched in her face. She had walked nearly a mile already, phone raised uselessly toward the cloudless sky, trying to find a signal. Nothing. She was used to solving problems with a phone call, a meeting, a check. But out here, surrounded by dust, heat, and silence, none of that mattered. Her blouse clung to her back, and frustration settled in her chest like a weight. That's when she saw him. He came walking up the side of the road, the sun casting a long shadow in front of him. Maybe 19 or 20, tall and lean, dark skin shining with sweat, sleeves rolled past his elbows. His boots were scuffed, the laces loose, and slung over his shoulder was a battered canvas backpack. As he got closer, he slowed and offered a nod, not hesitant, not invasive, just polite. "You look like you've been out here a while," he said, squinting toward the tire. Lena tilted her sunglasses down, more curious than cautious. "Long enough to hate the color beige," he smiled. It wasn't a practiced smile. It was gentle, like he wasn't in a rush to impress anyone. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, already stepping toward the car. She hesitated. Out here, miles from town, there weren't many options, and something about him felt unbothered, as if he didn't care that her car cost more than a year's rent, as if her silk blouse and manicured nails meant nothing. She stepped aside. He dropped his bag, unzipped it, and pulled out a small toolkit and gloves that looked like they'd been used by his grandfather and his grandfather's father. He knelt beside the car like he'd done this 1,000 times. When he asked about the spare, Lena pointed vaguely toward the back. He found it without needing her to explain. As he worked, Lena leaned against the car, watching in silence. There was something mesmerizing about the way he moved, methodical, focused, not emotion wasted. The kind of person who took pride in doing things right, even when no one was watching. "You do this often?" she asked after a few minutes. He didn't look up. "Sometimes. My uncle taught me. Ran a shop out near Espanola before he passed." That quieted her. There was a stillness to his voice, like he knew grief but didn't wear it loudly. When he finally stood and wiped his hands on his jeans, the tire was as good as new. He gave it a final check, then slung his bag back over his shoulder. "You're all set." Lena reached into her purse. "Let me..." He shook his head, taking a step back. "No need, ma'am. I'm just glad I came down this road today." She blinked. Her fingers hovered over a $50 bill. "You don't want anything?" "I've got what I need," he said simply. Then he started walking again, back the way he came, the late sun stretching his shadow across the cracked road. That night, Lena sat on the balcony of her quiet adobe rental, a glass of white wine warming in her hand. The emails had started to pile up again. Her lawyer, a reporter, a former board member with a carefully worded apology. 3 weeks ago, they'd voted her out of her own company. A graceful transition, they called it. But none of those people crossed her mind as much as the boy on the road. Malik. The calm in his eyes, the quiet strength in his hands, the way he walked away like she wasn't special, and somehow that made her feel seen. She had everything, or so she thought. But in that moment, the only thing she could think about was him. If this story touches your heart like it did ours, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below. You might just change someone's day. The next morning, Lena found herself behind the wheel again, retracing that same dusty highway outside Santa Fe. She hadn't planned to go back. She told herself it was just a drive, just clearing her head. But her eyes kept scanning the shoulders, every roadside bench, every fenced yard, as if some part of her already knew she was looking for him. At the edge of town, where the road dipped past a sagging row of mailboxes, she spotted him. Malik was up on a ladder, one hand steadying a wooden beam, the other holding a hammer. Below him stood an older woman in a housecoat, holding a lemonade glass and craning her neck upward. The porch roof he was fixing looked as if it hadn't seen care in decades. Malik was halfway through rebuilding it. Lena pulled over slowly, stepped out, trading her heels for the pair of flats she kept in the back seat. She stood watching for a minute until the old woman called up to him. "You've got company, sweetheart." Malik glanced down and blinked. When he recognized her, a small, unsure smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Miss Hartley?" "I was in the area," she said, though they both knew that wasn't true. He climbed down the ladder, brushing sawdust off his jeans. "Everything okay with the tire?" "Perfect," she said. "But I never got to say thank you properly." He shrugged. "You already did." Lena looked around at the bent nails, the stacked wood, the worn ladder. "You do this often?" "Sometimes. People need help." She tilted her head. "You don't ask for much, do you?" He chuckled softly. "If I can't replace it, I better learn to fix it." There was a quiet in the air that felt more intimate than any expensive dinner she'd ever attended. She looked at him again, the way his fingers curled around the hammer, the way he didn't flinch in silence. "Do you like coffee?" she asked. He raised an eyebrow. "Depends who's asking." She smiled. "Someone who's not done driving this road yet." They ended up at a small cafe near the train tracks, tucked between a pawn shop and a store that still had VHS tapes in the window. Malik ordered black coffee. Lena asked for tea she didn't really want. They sat in a cracked vinyl booth, backs against the window, their reflections overlapping in the glass. For a long while, they just talked. He told her about his uncle, about growing up with tools instead of toys, about a house that rattled in the wind and a mother who left before he turned 10. "You never asked for help?" she asked. He shook his head. "I asked this guy once." He smiled faintly. "Said no, so I learned not to." Lena stared into her cup. "I think I spent most of my life surrounded by people who helped only when it benefited them." Malik leaned back. "You're not used to being curious without a reason, are you?" She met his eyes. "I'm not used to someone walking away from me." He looked down. "People like me don't usually get asked to stay." She didn't know what moved her. Maybe it was the way he said it without bitterness. But she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. It was leather-bound, barely used. She slid it across the table. "What's this?" "An idea," she said. "A workshop space for kids, for veterans, for anyone who needs a second chance and a skill to stand on." He didn't open it. "You barely know me. I know what you did when no one was watching." For a moment, it felt like something had shifted in the air. Not romance, not yet, but possibility. A few days later, Lena invited Malik to a fundraiser at her former estate, a sprawling modern property with a lawn the size of a football field and a guest list full of people who hadn't called her once since the board voted her out. "I want you to come," she said gently. "There's a part of that world I still need to face." He hesitated. "You sure I fit into that?" "I don't know if I do either." She offered him a clean shirt from her car, a button-down still in its plastic wrap, and he reluctantly put it on. The party glowed with chandeliers and jazz music, laughter echoing against marble floors. Men in tailored jackets sipped drinks that cost more than Malik's rent, and women in heels walked as if the world belonged to them. Lena stepped in with Malik beside her. Eyes turned. She whispered, "They're just people." "No," Malik replied. "They're your people." A man in his 50s, probably old money and older opinions, approached with a practiced smile. "Lena, we thought you weren't coming." Then his eyes flicked to Malik. "And you brought a guest." "This is Malik Carter," she said clearly. "He's helping me with a new project." The man didn't offer his hand. "Charmed," he said, then turned away. Malik shifted uncomfortably. Lena touched his elbow, but he was already scanning the room. He drifted toward the refreshment table, but didn't touch anything. "You're not from around here, are you?" a voice said behind him. He turned. A man with 2 white teeth and a smirk leaned against the wall, sipping from a crystal glass. "Excuse me?" "Relax," the man said. "Just making conversation. Lena tends to bring home projects." Malik's jaw tensed. "She didn't bring home anything," the man chuckled. "She's got a history. Dogs, startups, strays." Before Malik could speak, a voice sliced through the music. "Is there a problem here?" It was Lena. The man straightened. "No problem. Just chatting with your friend." She looked him squarely in the eye. "Then find someone else to chat with." He disappeared into the crowd. Malik turned to her. "That's what this is to them. A show, a charity case." She looked embarrassed. "He's a jerk." He's not the only one staring. They don't matter. They matter to you, he said quietly. And I don't. She didn't answer. He stepped back through the side doors and onto the terrace. The cold air outside was sharp, honest. He leaned on the railing, staring out at the dark hills. Lena followed a minute later. I didn't think it would feel like this, she said softly. He didn't look at her. I didn't think I'd be on display. I came here for you, he said, not for caviar and whispered insults. She moved closer. I wanted them to see something good I found outside their world. He turned to her then. Turns out, he said bitterly, you don't want to be seen either. There was silence, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. I've spent my whole life blending in, he whispered, so I wouldn't get hurt. I'm not here to hurt you, she said. Then don't parade me. That landed. They stood inches apart but separated by something deeper than wealth or words. I should go, he said. She nodded, eyes glassy. He walked past her, paused at the door. Then, without turning, it wasn't the food. I came for you. But maybe I don't belong. Then he was gone. The sun hung low over the rooftops when Lena pulled into the gravel lot behind Thompson Hardware, her tires crunching the dirt like footsteps she wasn't sure she had the right to make. The air smelled like cut lumber and machine oil, familiar in a way that both grounded and humbled her. Malik was under a half-built shed, sorting bolts into a cracked plastic bin. He didn't look up when her car rolled in. He didn't need to. He knew the sound of that engine now, quiet, smooth, unmistakably foreign. She stepped out slowly. No heels today, no linen blouse, just jeans and boots, and a heart beating louder than she wanted to admit. She walked until she stood just beyond the workbench, where his tools were laid out like a language she hadn't yet learned to speak. You lost again? He said without looking at her. I was in the area. He gave a dry chuckle, still not turning around. You rich folks always in the area when you want something. There was no venom in his tone, just weight, a tiredness that ran deeper than sarcasm. I'm not here for a fight. Good, he muttered, finally glancing over. I'm tired of those. She stepped closer, slow, careful. I wanted to say I'm sorry. That made him pause, his hand stilled. He turned, expression unreadable. For what? For thinking I could bring you into that world and pretend it wouldn't matter. For not stopping that night when you clearly wanted to leave. He looked at her for a long moment. It wasn't about leaving. It was about being seen the wrong way. She nodded, taking in the dust, the sky, the wood stacked like unfinished intentions. I brought you into my space, she said, voice low, but I never gave you room to breathe. He folded his arms across his chest. Why do you care so much? Her answer came out thinner than she intended. Because you're the first person in years who looked at me without expectation or judgment. You just saw me. That silenced him. And when I lost everything that made people return my calls, the boardroom, the title, the headlines, you reminded me I still had worth. He looked down, shifting a wrench from one hand to the other. So now I'm your mirror. No, she said gently. You're the only honest thing I've had in months. A breeze stirred the dust between them. Somewhere in the back, a table saw whirred to life, then quieted again like a heartbeat. She reached into her tote bag, pulled out a worn notebook. It was the same one she'd shown him in the cafe weeks ago, but it looked different now. Lived in, its corners bent, its pages fuller. She handed it to him, her fingers brushing his. I kept working on it, she said. The idea, the workshop, vocational training, mentorship, a space for anyone who's been dismissed or overlooked. He took it, open to the first page, rough sketches, blue ink, wiring layouts, handwritten notes with circled phrases like second chances, dignity through skill, community repair. It's not a pitch, she added quickly. It's real. There's no board, no investors, just heart. He flipped through silently, then looked up. You don't have to say yes, she said, but I want you to know, I meant every word I said that night. He exhaled, closed the notebook gently. Why me? She met his gaze without flinching. Because you don't need to be rich to be extraordinary. His shoulders lowered just a little. And for the first time since the party, he really looked at her, past the polished name, past the money, past the awkward apologies. "All right," he said slowly, voice quiet but grounded. "I'll help you build it." A pause. "But on one condition." Her eyebrows lifted. "What?" "You stop apologizing for loving something real." Her breath caught, and then, to her own surprise, she laughed. Not out of humor, out of something that felt like relief. "Deal," she said. Later that week, they sat together on the tailgate of an old red pickup at the edge of the lot, blueprints spread out between coffee cups and tape measures. Dusk settled over the hills like a blessing, painting the sky in warm strokes. Malik pointed at a set of diagrams. "You drew the electrical setup backward." Lena squinted. "No, I didn't." He raised an eyebrow. "Okay," she sighed. "Maybe I did." He smirked. "You're lucky I'm patient. I'm lucky for a lot of things lately." She sipped her coffee, eyes on the horizon. "They're going to come after me again, you know. The press, the board. They'll say this is a vanity project, that I'm throwing money at a boy I barely know." He shrugged. "Let them say it." She looked at him. "You're not afraid?" "I've been underestimated my whole life," he said. "It doesn't scare me anymore, but it does fuel me." The silence between them wasn't awkward now. It was solid, like beams being anchored into the foundation of something that could finally stand on its own. Then, almost casually, he said, "You're not the only one who lost something." She turned toward him. "I lost faith," he said quietly, "a long time ago. In fairness, in people, in second chances. And now?" He looked at her. "You showing up every time. It started something." Her voice dropped. "What did it start?" He didn't smile this time. He didn't need to. Hope. The Denver Civic Convention Center shimmered in the afternoon sun, its glass walls reflecting a skyline stitched with cranes and ambition. Inside, the air buzzed with the kind of low, sophisticated tension that came with expensive coffee, tight schedules, and important names. Lena stood behind the curtain, heels planted, blazer sharp, palms damp. "Are you sure about this?" her assistant whispered beside her, adjusting the mic clipped to Lena's lapel. Lena didn't answer right away. She looked down at the notes in her hands, bullet points and buzzwords she wasn't going to use. "Yes," she said finally. "They need to hear it, all of it." The lights shifted. Her name echoed through the speaker system, followed by polite applause. She stepped out into the brightness. Rows of investors, tech media, venture capitalists, and former colleagues sat in rows of perfect posture. Logos pulsed behind her: Elevate Tech, Greencore, Future Front. All the brands she'd once shaped. Cameras pointed like silent questions. She walked to the podium slowly. The room hushed. "I was supposed to be here today to talk about projections," she began. "Growth, IP, exits." A flicker of confusion passed through the crowd. "But I'm not here for any of that." She paused, looked down. Not at her notes, but at the memory of calloused hands and a hammer swinging in rhythm. "I'm here to talk about what happens when we lose sight of people, when we trade integrity for influence, when we stop listening to voices that don't wear suits." Now the murmur began. A few heads tilted. Someone in the third row shifted in their seat. "You all know I left Carrington Green. What you don't know is why." Behind her, the LED screen shifted. No charts, no metrics. Instead, a photo, a workbench scattered with hand tools, a pair of hands guiding a young child's grip on a screwdriver, wood shavings, sunlight cutting through dust. "I left because I met someone who reminded me what real innovation looks like," Lena continued. "It's not a pitch deck or a press release. It's a person who fixes what others throw away, who teaches without needing to be seen." The room was quiet now, not bored, listening. "His name is Malik Carter." She let that name settle, let the air absorb it. "Some of you saw the article last month, the photo, the speculation, the jokes." She took a deep breath. "Well, let me make it easy for you. I love him." A silence fell so fast it felt like the walls inhaled. "And I'm not sorry." Phones lit up, fingers hovered, a ripple of movement broke out in the second row. "If that costs me your respect, your investments, or your invitations, so be it." She looked out over the sea of faces, some stunned, some blank, some leaning in. I'd rather build something honest with a man who teaches children how to hold a tool than spend one more year pretending in boardrooms full of people who forgot what it means to build anything. She stepped back from the mic. Not another word. She didn't need one. The silence was deafening. Then the storm came. Tech CEO walks away from fortune for local mechanic. Elevate Tech founder, I love him and I won't apologize. Hard over hedge funds, Lena Hartley shocks industry with confession on stage. Investors withdrew. Endorsements vanished. Speaking engagements were postponed indefinitely. She was praised and ridiculed in equal measure. Headlines split between admiration and mockery. But the letters started arriving. At first, just a few, then hundreds, then boxes, from retired teachers, welders, nurses, students, people who had been passed over. People who understood what it meant to be overlooked or used. One came on pink notebook paper, handwritten in blue pen, spelling shaky but fierce. My brother says girls can't build, but you proved him wrong on that stage. I'm going to build something too. It was signed. Sadie, age 12, Detroit. Lena read it aloud to Malik on the porch of their newly rented workshop space, a dusty warehouse outside Santa Fe that smelled like old paint and possibilities. He sat beside her, arms crossed behind his head, listening quietly. She gets it, he said. Lena smiled. Yeah, she does. The world thought Malik had fixed her tire. But what they never understood was that he had fixed something far deeper, something no wrench could touch, her sense of purpose, her direction, her heart. He didn't rescue her from the side of the road. He reminded her she was still worth saving. 1 year later, the desert outside Santa Fe looked different. Where there was once a crumbling warehouse lined with broken windows and graffiti, now stood a long, warm building with pine wood siding and a roof that caught the morning sun like a prayer. Wide glass windows stretched across the front, etched in clean lettering that read, Hartley Carter Workshop, Skills, Dignity, Future. The parking lot wasn't full of Teslas or black sedans. It was mostly beat-up trucks, bikes with rusted chains, and dusty sneakers parked against the side of the ramp. But inside, the place pulsed with something Lena hadn't seen in any of her tech campuses, joy. Sawdust floated through the air like glitter. The sound of hammers, drills, laughter, and occasional arguments about measurement filled the workshop. There were students from all walks of life, Black, Latino, white, Navajo. Some just out of high school, others trying to find their footing again after decades lost in factory layoffs or prison sentences. They worked side by side, not just building shelves and tables, but reclaiming something sacred, their self-worth. Malik stood at the head of the main room, his apron chalked and worn. A small boy watched him carefully as he demonstrated how to cut a dovetail joint. Steady, patient, clear. Let the blade do the work, he said. You're not forcing anything, you're guiding it. The boy nodded, his hands trembling just slightly as he followed Malik's lead. On the far end of the building, Lena greeted a group of local donors and community leaders, most of whom came not for tax breaks, but because they'd heard about what was happening here and wanted to witness it for themselves. She didn't wear heels anymore, or silk. Her blouse was linen, her jeans dusted with paint from the mural students had insisted on painting outside. A wide tree with tools in place of leaves. On her wrist, a friendship bracelet made from scrap fabric. A gift from a student named Tessa, who used to flinch every time someone raised their voice. The phone in Lena's purse buzzed every few minutes. Missed calls, interview requests, podcast offers. She didn't check any of them. Not today. Outside, chairs were set up around a small podium, flanked by 2 American flags and a backdrop of young saplings planted the previous spring. Families sat in the folding seats, some shielding their eyes from the sun, some holding babies on their laps. These weren't VIPs, they were real people. And this time, Lena was exactly where she wanted to be. Malik stepped up to the microphone. He wore jeans, a clean dark blue shirt, and his grandfather's watch. The same boots from that day on the roadside. He didn't clear his throat, he didn't look at notes. He just looked out at the faces in front of him and spoke like someone who finally believed he belonged. I used to believe, he began, that some people were born to stay small. He let the words breathe. That no matter how hard you worked, how kind you were, there were places you'd never be invited into. He looked down for a moment, then back up. And then I met someone who didn't invite me in. She stepped out of the door herself, sat next to me, listened. He glanced at Lena. Her eyes shimmered. She didn't hand me a ladder, she handed me tools. Murmurs of emotion passed through the crowd. Sniffles, quiet gasps, a few tearful smiles. This place behind me, it's not just a workshop. It's not about tables or fences or frames. It's about building something bigger than ourselves. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the building. It's for the kid who's told he talks too slow, for the vet who forgot what it felt like to be useful, for the mother who got tired of asking. A pause. It's for the ones like me. Applause rose, but Malik didn't move. He stood still for a moment longer. We named it Hartley Carter, he said, but the truth is, this place doesn't belong to us. He looked at the crowd, his voice steady but soft. It belongs to the future. The applause swelled and didn't stop for a long time. Later that afternoon, when most of the guests had left and the light turned gold across the desert, Malik and Lena sat on the back steps of the workshop. A few kids played tag across the field behind them, laughter echoing against the adobe hills. Lena leaned her head on Malik's shoulder. He leaned back into her, quiet and comfortable. You nailed it, she whispered. I didn't stutter, he said. Nope, you just turned every grown man in that crowd into a puddle. He laughed, but there was something deeper in the sound now, something healed. He looked out at the field. You ever miss it? The old world? She asked. He nodded. She shook her head. Not for a second. I didn't lose power. I just found a better way to use it. He was quiet for a moment, then said, You remember what you told me after that conference? Which part? That loving something real was worth losing everything else. She looked up at him. Yeah, she said softly. He reached for her hand, turned it over gently, and kissed her knuckles. You were right. Inside the workshop, the lights glowed warm. Tools hung neatly on the walls. Projects in progress waited on work tables, bookshelves, nightstands, hand-carved picture frames. Dreams made visible. The door creaked open. Lena walked in carrying a small framed photo. It had been taken a few weeks earlier. Malik standing in front of a group of students, chalk in one hand, his other gesturing mid-sentence. Sunlight through the window lit up his face. On the bottom of the frame, in small script, were 2 words. Love builds. He looked at the photo, then at her. Where do we hang it? She smiled. Somewhere it can't be missed. They stood together in the center of the workshop. The woman once called a tech visionary, and the man once called a charity case, now equals in a space they had built from the ground up. Not for profit, not for power, but for people. Some people come into your life to fix what's broken. Others remind you that you were never broken to begin with. If this story moved you, share it. Maybe someone out there needs a reminder that value comes from kindness, not status. See you in the next story.